Hello everyone, I am Robbie Jacinto and welcome to Memoirs. On the first episode of this historical podcast, we'll be discussing an incredibly relevant issue, not just in our nation, but the world as a whole. In our era, considered to be the information age, where the internet and social media provides us with a near overabundance of information, misinformation has only grown, further exacerbated with problems such as fake news and historical distortions. But why does this happen? And how did the pandemic play a major role in accelerating this issue? And how can historians and journalists combat this threat to truth? It is important to understand that this issue highlights the double-edged nature of our technological advancements. Although factual knowledge is made more readily available through various trusted sources, this also means that misleading information is equally as readily available. These altered or purposefully incorrect pieces of information only serve to misguide and confuse the masses, or at worst, serve the interest of a select few. This phenomena reached an all-time high during the pandemic, possibly due to the higher influx of misleading particulars on the internet, but also, possibly, as a result of a higher influx of access to the internet itself. The pandemic created this demand, nay, created this necessity for digital technology in all households. For some countries, this may not even be a problem at all. However, for nations such as the Philippines, this rapid and immediate access to information creates a sort of knowledge creep. Due to the low digital literacy rate of the country, fake news is consumed more frequently and at a significantly higher volume. And consequently, the negative effects of this misinformation is manifested at a greater capacity. But in this situation, what's important is the solution and what actions we should take in order to minimize the damages and hopefully, eventually, resolve the conflict. The big thing that historians should handle is to push for educational reforms, prioritizing the development of a curriculum that is free from both political and ideological biases. One that not only opts to teach facts and historical details, but one that also promotes historical analysis, allowing students to practice critical thinking towards the information they receive. And as for journalists, building rapport with the public seems to be becoming a growing necessity. But even I have to acknowledge that this is not only difficult, but could result in sacrifices being made against the distribution of truth, for the sake of positive public opinion. Before we continue with our discussion on history, let's take a brief moment to thank today's sponsor. Are you looking to experience the spirit of Lapu-Lapu? Dive into a world of adventure with our Lapu-Lapu-inspired scuba diving and island hopping packages. Explore the pristine waters and vibrant marine life, just like the legendary warrior himself. Discover the beauty of Lapu-Lapu's homeland and create your own historic memories. Book your adventure today and embrace the legacy of Lapu-Lapu like never before. Speaking of Lapu-Lapu, recently I watched an eyewitness documentary about him, and it emphasized some interesting dynamics with history, particularly with regards to why we know so little about certain things and how the things we currently know change over time. In the first question, why we know so little, I feel as if it is because time is a cruel mistress towards history, especially when it comes to preservation, and this causes information to be lost entirely at times. As an example with Lapu-Lapu, his true origins are simply unknown and may never be known because of how far back the events took place. And the things we do know, we aren't sure of, due to the varying and contradicting arguments that surround unclear historical topics. But it's not all bad. As time goes on, technology advances, allowing for new discoveries to be made, or reassessments of previous discoveries that have already been made. But I'd like to introduce two other possible factors for as to why we have difficulties keeping accurate records here in our country. First of which is the persistence of self-proclamation of historical facts for the sake of personal gain. It is a constant issue that detracts from the truth and instills confusion in those who do not have the ability to distinguish fact from fiction. And secondly is the mythical and religious nature of us Filipinos. We are drawn to both listen and tell stories. It's a hallmark of our culture. But when it comes to writing history, this becomes detrimental, as communities and individuals long to preserve the tales of their families and ancestors. Although we may and should treasure the fruits of our culture, we must also understand that each of us has a responsibility. A responsibility to uphold the truth in order to uphold the common good. And each of us may fulfill that responsibility by starting with ourselves. Educate yourself. And tune in to the next episode of Micro Memoirs. I've been your host, Robbie Jacinto, and see you next week.